Hey everyone, welcome back to the lineup.
Welcome back, guys. We have a really special episode for you today. We're super excited for you to see it. Today, we bring on two Oklahoma State football players, Micah Cooper and Landon Wolf. They're going to share a little bit about their experience, their journey to Oklahoma State, and we're really excited for you guys to hear it.
We now welcome on Landon Wolf. What's going on, Landon?
Nothing much. How are you guys?
Doing well. Welcome to the show here. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Landon, how's everything going in Oklahoma? I know you live in Tulsa. How's everything going on with the coronavirus?
Everything's pretty smooth. Nothing's really changed too much now that everything's looking back up. There's still limited seating in movie theaters and restaurants and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of panic or concern by the public, I would say.
Yeah, that's good for sure. So if we can jump right into it, if you want to talk to us a little bit, I know you had a unique way you got to OSU as a walk-on. So if you want to talk to a little about your athletic career, kind of how you got to Oklahoma State and where you're at now.
Yeah. So I grew up born and raised in Tulsa, and my high school was East Central High School. That's where I graduated from. But before that, I went to another school my freshman year, and I didn't play my freshman year. I just played on JV, and then my sophomore season, I decided I would do the transfer rules. And then my junior and senior season, I played at East Central, and I had a really good season my junior year. We had a lot of seniors, and I was one of the three seniors that we had going into my senior year that had played or even been on the team. So we had a really small senior class my senior year, and a lot of inexperience. And we had four coaches in 4 years at East Central, and just a lot of movement and things like that. So a lot of people from my team and from the Tulsa area in general went under recruited that year, and I was one of those. So I had a couple small D2 and NAIA offers, and I had visited and went to camps for and things like that. But the D1 schools that came always talked about prefer walk on, or they say they showed interest but never offered and never really followed up. So I know, I think it was like January, February after my senior season, my coach sent an email to like every school he can get a contact with. So to the recruiting directors, to the receivers coach, to the OC, to everybody he can get a contact with, he sent them an email with my highlight. And OSU was one of the schools that hit him back. So I went up to their junior day, their walk-on day, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you got that spot. With that can come a lot of mental health challenges going through this grind where, getting under recruited as a player definitely can take a toll on your mental health. Can you talk to us a little bit about your, mental health journey throughout this?
Yeah, so I think coming in, I was really uncertain. I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't talked to any walk-ons besides the one or two that I had met upon arriving, but I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what the opportunities were going to be like. I didn't know if I was even on the team, the difference between a walk-on and a preferred walk-on. I didn't know a lot of things. So I think coming in, I was very unsure and very anxious and nervous to get into the flow of things and get myself established into the program and just find people that I could relate to and be around. So I know for me, I always felt like I had to prove myself, go above and beyond in every area. And I know that, and not everybody felt that way. Being a walk on, I think we always have to have that chip on our shoulder or have that feeling that we do have to go above and beyond to get noticed and to make the most of our opportunities, because they're going to be more limited than the people that are on scholarship or the people that they've been recruiting, the people that they've had in-home visits with and things like that. And they built a relationship, and they watched them enough and trusted them enough to recruit them and follow up with them and offer them and get them on campus. So I think it was a lot of belief, like self-belief issues, self-doubt, confidence, things like that. They just came um, one through hard work, that I knew I had to establish myself as a hard worker before anything else, because that was going to be the foundation of me as a player. That's how all the other walk-ons had created a name for themselves, was just being hard workers and being able to adapt. So um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think fear of the unknown is a huge thing at all levels and all sports. But you talk a little bit about pressure. So, what is it like? Playing in the Big 12 at the big stage. All those fans playing some big time schools. What kind of pressures come with that, and how have you kind of seen that maybe affect some of your teammates, or how does that kind of get to you as a player?
I think playing at home is one of the best things if you have a good home crowd, and we have a great home crowd. So that's always a plus. But going on the road, I think the Big 12 is very competitive, and we have a lot of talent here, and we're not the offensive powerhouses and things like that, and no defense, whatever they want to say about it. But we have really good competition, and I think that every school in the Big 12 puts up a good competition, and the environments can definitely be intimidating at times. Third downs can get super loud, and if you're not focused and on the same court with the quarterback and with the sideline, then it can definitely be overwhelming at times, or it can feel, like it's too much to handle. But I think with experience and just with more and more reps we all become more confident. And I think, especially when we're on the road, being a team and being 120 strong, like with the medical staff and with the coaches and the team itself, we have to really stick together and make sure that we're all lifting each other's heads up and pat each other on the back when we do things good.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like you guys have a great team culture. I know the Big 12 is a huge power conference. I know that your big rival is obviously the University of Oklahoma. I'm just curious, just from a fan's perspective, like how crazy are those games playing Oklahoma, Oklahoma State? I know that's a huge rivalry.
It's always crazy. I mean, we've come out on the losing side the last 3 or 4 years, but the game is always good, like within a touchdown or two at the most, So I know playing at OU and playing at Oklahoma State, Bedlam's always crazy. And we go to OU this year, so it'll be a good last senior season, the last senior Bedlam game for me.
So I know a lot of times we have people on the podcast that kind of have a mental health journey of their own, and I know you shared a little bit with Ben about some people close to you that have struggled with a mental health journey. So what was that like, kind of being on the other side of that, as how you kind of stuck by people's side, and what were some of the things that you did to help them out when they were struggling?
Yeah, and I had talked to Ben a little bit about someone close in my family that had struggled with it. So seeing it was way different than my own experience. So seeing it, I didn't really know what the inside of that felt like, what the inside of the whole thing was like. I didn't know what the thought process was. I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. So being able to have a up close and personal look and a different perspective going through my own things was very different. And I didn't know how to really take it on. But I know that it was a period when I got to Oklahoma State where I was going through a whole lot and I felt very alone through it all. But I know I had friends that made me laugh, and that's something I talked to Ben about as well. Friends that helped me look at things from a different perspective and see that not everything has to be so serious, because I think that I was kind of overwhelming myself for putting too much on my plate with having to deal with the things that I was dealing with my friend passing, because I had a friend that passed coming into like one of the first weeks of my first semester at Oklahoma State in August. So I had a friend pass, and then also just dealing with everything that I mentioned, being a walk-on and just trying to solidify my status and find my role and find my position within the locker room. And all that was kind of really difficult on me for a long period of time. But I had friends that kind of helped me get out of that by showing me the other side of things, not the so serious side, because I'm naturally more of a serious person. So having people that I can have fun with and laugh, but also confiding with the personal things, the things that I'm going on, when I get to my room at night after practice and whatnot. So that was a huge help for me.
Yeah, I mean that's great that you had that support system. We always talk about it on this podcast a lot about how important it is to have a strong support system, and that's what's great about being on a team. You got, I don't know how many guys on a football team, 80 guys who are pretty much brothers to you from the beginning. Since you step on campus, there's guys that are looking out for you, guys that want to push you and make you better, and that's really what's great about a sport like football, a sport like baseball, or whatever sport you're playing. The camaraderie that comes with a team, and I know for you especially, coming in as a freshman, having the loss of a loved one, I can't imagine, like, especially as a walk on too. I mean, there was probably so much going through your head, and having teammates to go to was probably so big during that time.
Very, and I think that's why it's important for me to kind of try to be the best teammate that I had, you know what I mean, or that I wish I would have had at the time, because I did have good people around me that I can definitely trace how they helped and what they did to help and made me feel comfortable and made me feel accepted and welcomed, and that my problems weren't being overlooked or whatever the case may be. Just know that people cared, even if they couldn't help or solve my problem, they could be there for me as a friend and as a teammate and, as a brother at the end of the day. So I think that's kind of the same thing that I want to bring in. Just, I may not have the answer to everything. I'm no psychiatrist or nothing like that, but being able to let my teammates know that I'm there for them and that I genuinely care about what they have going on outside of X's and O's and sats and things like that. I think that's huge. And I think that we all work harder for each other and we all are able to motivate and push each other when we have a more personal relationship outside of the locker room and outside of, practices.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I mean, just being vulnerable and opening yourself up that, like, we're here together, no matter, the good and the bad. But my next question to you is kind of like, football is kind of seen as this big, like, masculine sport, toughing it out and, big on masculinity. And how have you kind of seen that play out, being a walk-on and, dealing with some stress that's come with that and fear of the unknown, like you talked about. But how do you think football and that toughness culture kind of plays out of people expressing how they're feeling and, what they're going through?
Man, I've thought about this a lot. I think it's very beneficial for the sport in terms of getting the job accomplished. I think if you look at football like a job, it's teaching you toughness, it's teaching you discipline, it's teaching you to do things that you don't necessarily feel like doing all the time, like lifting or practicing or conditioning or whatever the case may be. So I think it's good from that principle in terms of being strong and tough and manly and those things. But I think that so many of us student athletes have been playing a sport our whole life, and we've heard be tough, don't show weakness, don't do this, don't do that, don't show emotions, don't do all these things to make you less of a valuable player or addition to the team, that we take that into our personal life, and it shouldn't be that way. I think having someone to, or even having the thought placed in your head that these are two separate things, my day to day and my football or my sport experience can be separate. You know what I mean? And I think that being able to not only take that separation, but also infiltrate it with the football side of it, because it is times that it's important to play through pain. Everybody feels pain, especially during the season, especially in a game like football. But also knowing when to go in for treatment and when to speak up about certain things that are bothering you, whatever the case may be. So I think trying to find that balance between both of those is super important.
Yeah, I'm so happy you said that. I've had discussions actually recently, and there was another football player that came on last episode, Chris Paul. He's a lineman at Tulsa, and his big point, and the point that I always talk about, is the separation between your personal life and the sport. Because when you don't separate it, then you start creating your self identity around your sport, and at the end of the day, the sport ends for everybody, whether it ends playing in the NFL or it ends playing in Pee Wee football. It's going to end at some point. And the better you'll be better off if you can disassociate your own self with your sport and realize yeah, football's a part of me. It's my passion. It's a game I love, but it's not all I have to offer. I'm different off the field. There's things I have to get done on the field, but when I'm off the field, it's not necessarily how I'm going to act or who I am as a person.
Most definitely. And I think that's something that I've been trying to do these last few months, just understanding that my time at Oklahoma State, being a student athlete, is coming to an end. This is my senior season. So in December, I'll be free of all the labels, and I'll be out kind of outside of the team realm. So I think that being able to look at the skills and look at the lessons that football has taught me and transfer them to the real world and to a job and to my personal life is going to be huge, because someone told me that to look at football like a temp job. It's just the same thing you said. You can play it for, everybody plays it for however long they play it, but it ends for everybody someday. So I think being able to look at it as, how can I network? How can I best position myself for the next step, whatever that may look like? And also, what lessons can I learn, not just from the sport, but how can I take the lessons from the sport into the real life?
Yeah, that's a great point. And going back to what you said before, I think that balance, is so important. And you talk about, I think a lot of people think there's extreme toughness and then there's extreme vulnerability. But you talk about there being a combination of both, and being able to be tough enough to seek help is something that's kind of important for me. And people think of tough as oh, I'm tough, but toughness is being able to get help in my eyes. That's a sign of strength to me. And the way you brought those together was great. So I'm glad you brought that up.
No, absolutely.
So another question we have on mental health advocacy is, do you think if meaningful education was pushed on coaches and athletes within NCAA programs, we would see these changes going on? And what changes do you think need to be made, and how is that affecting your team culture?
I think just providing more information about what mental health options are available would be things like therapy, because people have lives outside of football. And I think, us at Oklahoma State, we do have counselors and psychiatrists that we can go to if we want to work on visualization for our sport, or if we just want to talk to somebody. But I know for myself, it feels very, very formal and very, it's the right thing to do as a school and as a university. But I think that us being student athletes, we have such tunnel vision every day. We see student athletes every day, whether we're at the training table with other athletes, or we're in practice, or we're in film, and all we see is our day to day. And we're so busy; it's easier for us to just go to practice, go to class, go to practice, go home, and do that over and over. So I think just being aware, and taking time out of the day to go and maybe join a therapy, or sign up for therapy and go see a counselor, or participate in other things outside of your sport, because I think being so involved with our sport can be a detriment if that's all that you see, because then, like you said, your identity is based on how well you perform and what you can add to the team. So I think just if coaches can have a positive relationship with their players, for one, that players have that open line of communication from their coach. They can call them, they can text them, they can go see him in his office about school or about football or about what's going on at home, I think that's major because, like I said, when you have a personal relationship with others, then you'll work harder for somebody if you know what they're going through. Outside, what they enjoy, what they don't like, what they're going through outside of the football realm, and I think that's super important too. So I think this coach is prioritizing a connection is something that's really important to me.
Yeah, you make a great point there. I always think that, you have to have that relationship with your coaches, especially in today's day and age. It's so essential to be able to open up to your coaches and have that personal relationship. So, because you're in college, right? These coaches want to help you further in life, not just in your sport. Yeah, they want to help you in football or baseball or whatnot, but they also want to help you as a man. And being able to have those conversations is so essential to like developing college athletes into, future endeavors.
Most definitely, and I think that's gonna make the team better. I think you can go talk to a coach and information from like that, then it's just gonna trickle down. The coaches are gonna see that if they kind of see themselves eye to eye with the players in terms of they can level with them and talk to them about more than just X's and O's, then I think that's gonna pass down from the freshmen to looking up to the seniors and the seniors talking to the freshmen, kind of having that same power and balance and what influence looks like, and just being able to use that to the fullest potential.
Yeah, so I got one final question for you, Landon, before we wrap up
Yeah.
here. From your experiences, you've had a pretty unique journey as a walk-on and, your experience in high school. What advice would you give to someone who's maybe going through something similar, who's in high school getting under-recruited or in college, feeling some of those pressures? What advice would you give to them?
Seek out help. I think everybody knows who's genuine in their lives and who wants the best for them and who is in a position to help and who has a position of knowledge and who's been through certain things. So for me, I was able to talk to coaches that had played in college or that had been through the recruiting process for X amount of years. And I wasn't able to talk to college players, but if I was able to talk to college players, that's something that I would do. So I would recommend, networking with your coaches and letting them know what your goals are and what you want to do and what steps you need to take because obviously we don't know everything. We don't know what we don't know. So I think asking questions and letting your pride and your guard down in terms of wanting to do everything on your own and being able to say you're a self-made success, I think that's very overrated. So I think just dropping your pride, being able to ask questions, and just humble yourself and just work for what you want. I think for myself, I felt like I was good enough to go to a Division I program, and that's what I took the chance on. But I know I wanted to play football. So if I like was looking at myself in the mirror and I had looked at my inner circle and they told me that I wasn't good enough to play at this level and I knew that they meant it from a genuine place and they wanted the best for me and I needed to go to or JUCO or whatever the case may be, then I would want to heed their advice and, at least take it into consideration. So I think just having a good circle around you and just working for where you want to be at.
And that was Landon Wolf. We now welcome on his teammate, Micah Cooper. Hey, Micah, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for coming on here.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate Landon and yourself coming on to talk a lot about, mental health in athletics and, what it's like at Oklahoma State. So we're going to touch base and start a little bit on your athletic career growing up until Oklahoma State. So do you want to touch a little bit about your JUCO days up until Oklahoma?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even before JUCO, I was at a Division II school. Coming out of high school, I didn't get, a lot of big offers, a lot of Division I offers, like a lot of my teammates did. And so I went Division II out of high school. I was there for 3 semesters, and then I just kind of realized I felt like I had settled on my dreams and my goals, so I decided to go for it. I went to JUCO for a year, and things that ended up working out how I wanted them to at JUCO. I ended up walking on at OSU, and then eventually earning a scholarship. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what was that like going through the whole JUCO process? What were some of the kind of fear of the unknown that Landon talked a little bit about, but kind of what were some of the stressors that went through that and what was going through your mind when you were going through that whole process?
Yeah, JUCO was rough, man. Just because, at that point I hadn't known any different than what I'd already seen. And so going to a completely new environment with just completely different types of people than before, because JUCO is like, I don't know how much you guys know about junior college football, but it's a lot of different backgrounds coming from whether it's people that were getting in trouble, people that just didn't get recruited, or just people that are bouncing back from Division I schools. So it's kind of a weird melting pot of football players, and I think it was a weird adjustment for me to get used to, and it kind of took me a long time to get out of it when I went to OSU.
Yeah, for sure. The only JUCO I've really seen is Last Chance U with East Mississippi. So I don't know if that's any relation to how it was like, but
I think it's a little worse than what they show on there.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a grind for sure. I know there's definitely a lot of different situations that guys are trying to pull from and try to make a name out of. So I'm really happy you were, even though you said, you didn't get recruited by Oklahoma State, you were a walk-on. I'm happy it worked out for you. But, with that, there had to have been a lot of mental health challenges going through your head and a lot of the physical part's big, but what was the mental side? What was that like going through all these challenges?
Yeah, I think, you always expect something to work out, or at least I do. And then it's always a tough transition when things don't work out how you want them to. And I think when I was going through that, I was just going through a lot of different feelings of, it was a lot of different emotions. I think a lot of them was, I don't know if it was regret, but it was more disappointment, or maybe I always felt like I had a vision of how my life was supposed to go or what I was supposed to do. And I felt like I wasn't living that or upholding it. So it was very discouraging. And so it kind of made me just kind of want to just throw the whole plan away and just go do something else. But, luckily it wasn't up to me, and things ended up working out a different way. I met some people that helped me out, and I was able to end up where I ended up now.
So what was that jump like? You talked a little bit about the culture at JUCO, but then jumping up to the Big 12, obviously playing in front of all those fans and in a big time conference. What was that jump like for you? And what's your experience been like at Oklahoma State so far?
Yeah, it was just a big difference, man. Like as far as just how the games go, I've never been anywhere where there was that many people at one time, and so it's a great feeling, man. Like going out there and hearing all those people cheering for you, it's an amazing feeling. And I think more than anything, I think a lot of guys were nervous. I think I had visualized it so much. It was just like, wow, I'm really here type of feeling. It wasn't as much as nerve-wracking as you might think it would be. But it was definitely an adjustment just from coming from where I came from and then going to OSU. It's just so different how Division I works, especially Power 5 schools. It's how they operate and how they do things. It's a lot different. And it definitely took me a little while to figure it out and, adjust to the new way of how I was going to be living.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you want to touch a little bit more about the visualization? I know you talked to a little bit about Ben about that, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't really know too much about, or not, they don't use too much. And I think that's great that you use that. So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I read a lot of different books, and I think a lot of them focus on meditation of some sort. I have a hard time of just clearing my head when I try to meditate. It doesn't work too well for me. So my form of meditation is really just visualization. So I will go and just focus on what my life is right now, and then I will go and think about where I want my life to be, what that looks like, the different sights, the different sounds, who I want in my life at that point. And then once I'm done kind of visualizing all those different things that I want, I kind of back up and I visualize the steps that it's going to take to get to that point. And so I like to do that a lot. It helps me put a lot of things in perspective.
Yeah, that's a great point. Visualization and meditation are big things that I practice as well as a baseball player. The thing that helps me a lot on the field is, visualizing, because a lot of times there's obviously self-doubt in everything you do. And in my personal experience with baseball, you're thinking about it and you're up there and it's just you against the pitcher, right? So you got to visualize before you get up, you hitting the ball up the middle, you doing a job. And going off of that, more about you talking about reading books, I tend to read a lot of self-help books as well. And a lot of what they talk about is, you visualize yourself at that point. You visualize yourself, at where you want to be in life. But what another point that you mentioned, which is great, is you also think about the process that's going to have to be taken to get to that point and the work that you have to do in the middle. Because something that I learned and that I've been reading up on, it's like, yeah, you could like the idea, but unless, you're willing to mentally prepare yourself for the grind or the grit that's going to take to get to that point, you like the idea, but you don't really want it. What you really want is if you really want it, you really want like the grind that comes with it, the constant working out with it, the working on it, and constantly trying to get there. And it seems like you've really embraced that from your JUCO experience up until Oklahoma State. So I really love that.
So my next question for you is, I asked a similar question to Landon, but, football and males in general kind of have a tough time being vulnerable about what they're experiencing. And I think a lot of that comes from the culture that we have in society about, what it's like to be a football player, what it's like to be a male athlete. And why do you think that is so hard for male athletes and specifically football players from your experience to come out and kind of share what they're experiencing or share, what's going through their mind?
I think so as men in general, let me speak for men first. I think as men, we're kind of held to the standard that we're supposed to be tough and that we're supposed to kind of have it all together. We're supposed to be the leaders. And I think sometimes we're told that we need to be strong. And I think strong sometimes gets confused in that. And they think that if you speak on how you're feeling or speak about what you're going through, that it's a sign of weakness, which is not at all. And so I think, especially with football players, we're the epitome of supposed to be the tough guys. We're supposed to be the meanest and the most toughest guys out there. So to go and say, hey, I'm dealing with this, or this is how I'm feeling, or I'm really going through something right now, it's kind of looked at a little weird. And I think that it's just a stigma that maybe we're putting on ourselves and that we're just not comfortable yet opening up. But I do think that's a big deal of just the stigma of what a football player is supposed to do and how they're supposed to be. I think that's a main part of it.
Yeah, that's a great point you make there. I know that a lot of times with men, we take on a role ourselves, and I think that's just like the stereotypes of men from before our time. The older generations of what masculinity meant and what being tough meant is a lot different than what we think of it as now. And for me, being a man is not only, the physical aspect of being tough, but it's, being willing to be vulnerable and being okay with opening up and being able to lean on your teammates. And Landon mentioned that a lot on the last when he was up. He talked a lot about, his tough time coming into OSU as a freshman and then dealing with the loss of a loved one, which he was fortunate enough to have his teammates to lean on and be there for him and have some friends to support him, which is, in my book, the modern definition of what masculinity should be.
So I got one final question for you here, Micah. With the journey that you've been through, JUCO and D2 all the way up to the D1 level and kind of the mental health journey that you've encountered, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe going through a mental health journey? Some of the strategies that you use, but what advice would you give to someone who's going through a similar thing?
I have a lot, man. I would say first, finding someone that you're on a similar level with, or going on a similar journey with. I've been very fortunate to have a friend like Wolf, Landon, that I can talk to and confide in, who has been very helpful for me in my life. And I'm able to talk to him about a lot of different things, and he's able to do the same, and we're able to grow from each other. And I think that's very important to have someone that you can just roll with in your journey, whether that's, athletics or just life in general. It's important to have someone that you can have right on your side, that you can just have help you go on that journey. I think also, going after any goal or chasing any dream can be very taxing on your mental health. And I think it's just important to realize that where you're at and just be okay with where you're at the moment. Where you're at right now in your journey is not the permanent spot, and you just have to be consistent and you got to keep moving forward. And that's not always an easy thing to do. But I think just having the realization that this is not a permanent circumstance, it'll definitely help with you trying to move forward.
And that was Landon Wolf and Micah Cooper from Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that show. I'm glad they both came on to share their story. I think they both bring up some really great points. Specifically for Landon, I love how he brought up the importance of having a strong support system and leaning on people around you when you're going through a tough time.
Yeah, they did an outstanding job there. I really enjoyed this episode. Like you said, Landon said that really well, but also Micah's points on, how to get up from JUCO, self-help, meditation, and visualization is key. I use it a lot in my sport, so I know that was an excellent point that he made. This was a really great episode. I mean, I can't say it enough. That was awesome. Be on the lookout for next week's episode, guys. Thanks so much.